Morning. Good morning again. We're starting in 7 minutes. It's getting super close. 7 minutes. Are you ready? If you're not, it's okay. You have 7 minutes to be ready. Only 45 seconds to go, so be ready, and we're starting in now 40 seconds.
Our world is changing rapidly in complex ways. The greatest challenge of advanced technology is not simply learning how to adapt to it, but shaping it with the creative imagination of human purpose. For almost 20 years, we have walked with individuals and teams to discover purpose and unite creatively to seek new ways toward an economy for shared humanity, also known as the economy of communion. At the heart of our work is how to inspire movements for personal, leadership, organizational, and place transformation. We began our adventure from Singapore, and with Shape the World changemakers from the Americas, Asia, and Europe, we are here for you as you seek to be future resilient to impact a better world. This is what creative change means. This is Consulus.
Good morning. Can you think of a time when you tried to change something and you couldn't do it? If the answer is yes, please raise your hand. Can you think of a time when you changed something, you did it, but then sometime later you went back to the old habit or the old anything you were doing? If the answer is yes, please raise your hand. So now look around you. Change is not easy. Change is difficult. Even more if people we want to drag with us in this change are still not convinced about it. So change needs time. Today, with you, I will be witnessing many small stories that have happened here and there in different fields about change. And I am sure, I trust every one of you sitting here today has a story to tell us about this. And I actually salute the effort of Consulus to, through their different activities, they are mapping all these stories of change. Because a drop here, a drop there, at some point, it will fill the space. And maybe, who knows, at some point, maybe we will have a flood of change. My name is Joanna Maria Najjar. Today, we are here for a very serious purpose. This is why it's called a summit, right? It's Shape the World Summit 2024. I just took us 20 years back. This was really nice. Shaping, giving the shape to something, to the world. This is happening every day, but is it happening for good? This is a big question. In 2005, conferences in Singapore were mainly about make money, how to make money, make more sales, how to make more sales, pushing for that. No one was talking about make business for good. What is the objective behind this, right? So here today, we are gathered from different sectors. We have businesses, we have nonprofits, we have governments. The common ground is working for good. A successful change needs every one of us. Without further ado, let's move to our first track. What does it mean to have a cause? What does it mean to have a vocation? We will welcome our first speaker because he will tell us all about it. Jim Funk is the Global Senior Fellow for Leadership at Consulus. With a wealth of experience in leadership transformation and coaching, Jim is renowned for his expertise in strengthening leadership teams and individuals to thrive in today's complex world. As a recognized expert in leadership development, Jim has designed and delivered programs globally, focusing on innovation, change, and growth. Jim, his wife, 4 kids, 8 grandkids, live in Indianapolis, Indiana, in USA. Let's listen to every word Jim has to say about strategies for inspiring and empowering leaders to drive positive change. Jim.
Everyone. I don't know who the younger guy is up here, but I'd like to be like him. Anyway, fellow speakers, distinguished leaders, and honored guests, I'm grateful to Consulus and to the planners of this year's Shape the World Summit for including me and inviting me to share some of my thoughts and experiences of working with leaders who have a clear cause for their leadership and for their lives, really. And then challenge us, I hope to challenge us individually to affirm or perhaps even discover or rediscover our cause, the cause that we each have. My talk will address 4 main questions. What do we mean by cause? Why is cause important? How do we discover our cause? And how do we best live out our cause, especially as change-making leaders? So what do we mean by cause? We all have a purpose in life, but a cause is much more. In the case of leaders, it's our reason. It's our reason for being, our reason for leading. While a purpose gives us meaning and direction, a cause is what gives us fire in our belly, igniting our motivation, and giving us a strong bias for action. Have you ever written down what your cause is as a leader? I invite you to write it down sometime soon. That's your first assignment from my talk. I will have 3. You don't have to do it right away, but soon. And the reason I invite you to write it down, it doesn't even have to be a whole page, even a paragraph or a few sentences will suffice. But I've seen such cause statements expressed in even a sentence or 2. And when you write it down, you might be surprised because when we write, we use a different part of our brain, and sometimes we see things differently than when we just say things out loud. Interesting. I think you'll find that very interesting. It sometimes gives us new insight. We can even use the word vocation to describe our cause. The word vocation comes from the Latin vocare, which means to call, or in some cases to be called, or a calling. Our vocation is our calling. While we each have many different types of vocations in our lives, whether that be volunteerism, the vocation of parenthood, the vocation of a spouse, today I will focus on the vocation of the leader, specifically the change-making leader. So, why is a leader's cause important? Our cause, as I said earlier, is really our driving force. It's what gives us energy, passion, and ultimately the competence to live out our cause and to make change. Without a cause, we are like a boat sailing without a rudder. We have no map, no plan, no destination. We're definitely not leading. When there's a disconnect or a lack of alignment between what the leader believes is their cause and what they are actually doing, I have found that that is one of the primary reasons for performance problems, dysfunctional relationships, a lack of clear vision, and difficulties with sound decision making, even a lack of satisfaction with work and life satisfaction, which leads to unhappiness. So as you can see, it is so important. And ultimately, the organization will not be able to reach goals without leaders who have strong commitments and understanding of their cause. To take the time to examine our cause and what might be the gap between our cause and our actions, which is your second assignment, by the way, examine that gap. It's well worth the time. And the reason I invite you to do that is that we can otherwise spend years working. We get into a rut, we get into a role, and we just stay. Sometimes we're not leading, not doing, not accomplishing, looking but not seeing. And without clear cause, the leader's followers also flounder. Would you agree? They don't have an understanding of where the leader is taking them, what the reason is for the destination, or even what it is, and how they will know when they've arrived there. So how do we discover our cause? When it comes to careers, whether it's a vocation in leadership or another field, the process is really the same. There are steps a person can take and clues they can pay attention to that will help reveal their cause, their vocation, their calling. First of all, we must realize that a calling infers an invitation, does it not? An invitation of some kind, or a summons. What are we called to do, and who is making that call? Something worth thinking about. We can begin by taking the time to reflect on the gifts and talents that we've been given. Some of these talents are part of our individual makeup, our inherited traits, and some are learned or developed through our experience and our socio-historic background. What are our interests? What do we really believe in? What are our skills and abilities? And more viscerally, we can reflect on how we feel and how satisfied we are, as if we are where we belong when we have identified and are acting on our true cause. In the case of a calling to leadership, we also must examine why. Why do we want to be a leader? Maybe we've been seen as a leader by others. Thereby the invitation has maybe come through what others have said to us, like, you have some tremendous leadership qualities, or when you're leading, we feel like we're all going in the same direction. That's a clue that we have leadership capabilities. People are not born leaders per se, I don't believe. Would you agree? We may be born with propensities such as acute senses that are important for listening and perceiving, verbal skills and thought processes that are important to clear communications that leaders need, but things like self-awareness, insight, organizational skills, strategic thinking, people skills, and other leadership characteristics and competencies like that must be developed over time. That development occurs through a combination of life experiences, a willingness to lead, taking opportunities that arise, courses in leadership, and sometimes mentors, coaches, among others. What I'd like to offer here that may be unique about leadership from all the different ideas and things you've read about leadership is that becoming a leader is not only about acquiring the skills and competencies, but it's about who the leader is and who the leader is becoming as a person. The values, the presence, the leader's behaviors, especially when under stress. That's when you tend to find a leader's true colors, when they're under stress and how they act in those situations. The ability to form positive relationships, and more. So finally, how do we live out our cause, our vocation as leaders? One way is to stay in alignment and notice when we are experiencing a dissonance that may indicate we are not doing what we are called to do. That dissonance gives us a clue. Then, without true cause, if you have a true cause, you will not need to be convinced. You will know, your heart will tell you that you're not aligned with your true cause. So, speaking of change, this track is about cause for change. My topic is supposed to be cause and creative leadership. So I mentioned earlier that leading change, especially large-scale change, and Johanna mentioned it as well, is one of the most challenging tasks of leadership. But to do it well, we must first be able to change ourselves, and to do so from the inside out. That means that if we don't believe we need to change or are unwilling, because maybe we're too comfortable in our current state, then we will never be able to actually change, or to change others, or to shape impactful creative change in our organizations and ultimately in our world. This takes courage and a commitment to change. Change is not easy for us humans, is it? Our brains are wired to do things the way we've always done them, are they not? Because it's faster and easier than learning new neural pathways up there. There are many factors to consider when leading change, but I believe the first is to believe in the reason for the change, the cause. And I don't mean there has to be a burning platform. By then it might be too late. Would you agree? I mean that we need to understand the cause for change, be able to articulate it, and share the vision. We can't do it alone. It takes good leadership and in turn, good followership. But this is our opportunity. It's the way we can truly live out our call to creative leadership when we can lead change. Notice I did not use the words manage change, because that infers the change will just happen and we have to manage it. No. Creative leaders must be able to lead and make the change happen. Otherwise, it's like being back on the seas without a rudder. This is truly our opportunity. It is our time. You will be able to change the world. You can be creative leaders, leaders with cause. Be change makers. This is your third assignment. Nothing can stop you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jim. I really wish leaders of my country knew this, because my country of birth, because I have seen also the difference between leaders who know this, what they do with the country, and leaders who don't. I would like to invite you to stay on stage, please, Jim, because our next speaker will be with you, right? Yes. This speaker marked me even before I got to know him. Why? For me, members of a parliament are faraway people, untouchable people. But today, Mr. Desmond Tan is showing me, personally, that showing the human side is possible. That it is a choice. And that we can decide to generate change and have the humility to share about it. So, Mr. Desmond Tan. Welcome on stage, please. Thank you. As the Senior Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office, Deputy Secretary General of NTUC, and Member of Parliament for Pasir Ris Punggol, Mr. Desmond Tan brings a wealth of experience in public service and leadership. With a distinguished career spanning over 30 years, including roles in the Ministry of Defense and as Chief Executive Director of the People's Association, he has made significant contributions to Singapore's development. You see what you do to me? Thank you for that. Today, Mr. Desmond Tan will tell us something about the vocation and cause for labor movement.
Hello. Are we on? Yes. Thank you. And thank you for being here with us, Minister Tan. So my first question for you is, in your journey, how did you discover your vocation to serve others?
Oh, thank you, Jim. First of all, let me thank Lawrence for inviting me here. I guess most of us are here because of Lawrence and his partners and Consulus for the great work they have been doing, not just in Singapore, but across the world. Connecting people, doing good and doing well at the same time. I'm sure, Jim, you're part of this very important purpose as well, right? So thank you so much for inviting me. And what better way to start a Friday than to have, being able to join a group of like-minded people in an absolutely stunning setting. I've never had such background in any talks that I had. It's always in a room, right? But what a beautiful setting. So thank the organizer for organizing this. Well, I think this is an interesting topic, and Jim, I really enjoyed what you said in your speech about why is vocation important, why is a cause important, and how do we discover them. And this is where I think most of us would like to have a story like Moses, right? That he saw a burning bush, and then he found his calling to lead the people out. But unfortunately, I don't have a story like that, and I doubt many of us have a story like that to tell. Nor have I ever taken a particular test or quiz to discover what is my innermost drive and belly-burning desire to serve. Maybe I'll just share a little bit about my journey from where I was to where I am today, and from there maybe we can deduce what are some of the little tenets that helped me arrive to where I am, discover my own cause. So for those who are, I forgot to welcome those who are not from Singapore. A warm welcome to Singapore. Thank you for making time. And what an appropriate place. So this is the gateway to the rest of Singapore. I hope you don't just stay in the airport. Please go out to the cities and enjoy the rest of Singapore. So I grew up in a very small and old town in Singapore called Bukit Ho Swee. And for those who are familiar, it is a very old place, simple. And it was a 3-room flat, barely 60 square meters. There were 13 of us in the house. So the two things I learned in that growing up stage for 21 years until my adulthood, right? First is that actually living in a closed space means that you need to learn to respect each other. You learn to adapt to very uncomfortable situation. And second thing, you find every way to get out of the house. That's the second thing I try to do, right? So I found sports an extremely exciting thing because it get me out of my house. It get me to mix around with people from different neighborhoods and get to enjoy something I really love to do. So sports was a very important part of my growing up days. But that didn't cause me to find my calling or my vocation. So when did I actually make that transition? As we grew up in Singapore, at that time in the 70s, 80s, there were not a lot of things for us to look forward to. There was not many MNCs, there were not many exciting jobs like we have today in the tech sector, finance sector, manufacturing. At that time, we were all inspired by our very life journey. In school, we meet teachers, they are inspiring. We are inspired to be a teacher, right? Maybe in the neighborhood, you met somebody who is very smart and who helps you, and you find that maybe I want to be like him. So I would say that the first sort of a little calling for me is when I went to national service, like Lawrence. In fact, that was the first time we met, right? So, of course, I'm much older than him. But we all served 2.5 years at a time in Singapore, conscription. So my calling was not driven out of my desire to join the army, but because I didn't have a choice. So unlike what the MC, Joanna, right, what you said, I do make many choices, but national service was not a choice I made. But sometimes, you know, your vocation sort of calls you not at a time where it's convenient or where it's something that you want, but it presents a certain circumstances and a certain possibility towards you. So it is in national service that my outgoing, my extroverted leaning allowed me to become a leader. So of all the cohort, maybe 1,000 of us in the 3 months, about 5 to 10% of us were selected to go to officer cadet school. And I happened to be one of them. And like you said, Jim, sometimes it's not what we think of ourselves, but what other thinks of us, right? So this is where the organization called the Army thinks that I am suitable to be a leader. And that kind of gives me the awareness and maybe the little tinkling that perhaps leadership is something I ought to be thinking about. But it wasn't until I went to the unit, an operational unit, to lead about 28 soldiers as a platoon commander, that I truly found what I think I would like to do. Prior to that, I always wanted to be a teacher because I was very inspired by my teachers in my secondary school, Queenstown Technical School, right? And in fact, Queenstown Secondary School, I'm not sure anybody from Queenstown, the motto in the school was, dare to serve in Malay, Berani Berkhidmat. And that has always stuck in me. Maybe that's the reason why it kind of subconsciously drives me towards that service. But in the Army, I realized that actually I found that I have a little bit of talent in doing what the Army calls for. I have a real liking to influence the lives of 27 men within my command, and I really enjoy the impact I was making for every soldier and for the unit. And that's where I find maybe that is something that I ought to do for a longer time. And if you were to use the word vocation, and that's how I started my journey as a regular officer. I decided to sign on. But even then, I would say that it is rather transaction because I decided to sign on partially also because of the scholarship. I was about to finish my national service and go to university, and I realized that financially I needed some help. So the Army offered a scholarship. I took it up. It was a good transaction, and I figured 8 years is something I can live with. But the real test of the calling is after the 8 years, when I truly have a choice. And that's where I decided, when I look back, I decided that the Army is what I love to do, what I can do well in, and what I can make a real impact for the people around me and for the country. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It just seems like that led you to public service. That's right. Yeah, you discovered it in that real, very, very real way. Next question is kind of about your role, but how would you define the vocation and cause of the labor movement in Singapore?
Okay, so maybe I'll continue my story, part 2. So after the Army, I spent 28 years in the Army doing different roles, but mostly in leading soldiers in the unit. And then subsequently, after I retired, I joined the public service as Chief Executive of People's Association. And that's where I was sort of discovered that I may be suitable to join politics. And I was called to join the politics. I took it up. After that, I went to 2 ministries in the Home Affairs and in Sustainability Environment before I joined the labor movement. So I want to start off by saying that in Singapore, we have a very unique arrangements where government officials are seconded to the labor movement or the trade union on a regular basis because of the symbiotic relationship between the party, the PAP party, which Mr. Lee Kuan Yew started, and the trade union, right? So I would say the vocation of the labor movement or the trade union is a very important one, not just only for the government, but for Singapore. We didn't start off having such industrial peace. Maybe I'll just share a little bit of the history. In the 1950s and 1960s, Singapore was full of strikes, labor strikes. At the peak, we had about 275 strikes in 1 year. There is nearly 2 strikes in 3 days. That was the labor relationships in the 50s and in the 60s. And post-independence, we realized that this is not going to help us to grow our economy, to help us to attract foreign direct investment. And as a result, our people are not going to get good jobs. Our workers are not going to benefit. And that's where the trade union, the National Employers Federation, and the government got together, and we say that we have to form this tripartite relationship, partnership, that will allow us to find win-win solution. It cannot be a case where in order for the workers to win, the employers have to lose. Or for the employers, the businesses to win, the workers have to lose. We have to find a win-win solution. So we have a unique relationship where, and the fundamental philosophy that cements this relationship is about growing the pie for Singapore. So instead of each constituent, each party working very hard to fight over a small pie, we decided we should work together to grow a bigger pie so we all share in it. So having joined the labor movement, my own reflection is that our mission is to make sure that we allow every worker to earn a better wage and to live a better life. And when I joined politics, and I like what Jim said about writing down your cause. I have never written down my cause until I joined politics, because you have a Facebook page, you got to write something, right? So I decided that I need to seriously sit down and think, what is my mission statement? What is my cause? And to today, I live by this, and I reflected over my life. Actually, this has been the cause that has been driven me, has been in my belly to drive me to do more. And the statement says that there is no greater purpose than to improve the lives of people around us. And that has always been my purpose, my cause, my vocation, and that continued to be my vocation. So when I was asked to join the labor movement, I felt that it kind of aligns with my own personal cause. It's to improve the lives of every worker in Singapore, to make sure they have the best lives, best jobs, and best outcome for themselves and for their families. So I think that, of course, the labor movement plays a critical role to protect the workers, their interests, and we say their welfare, the wages, and the work prospect. But it also contributes to our competitive advantage in the businesses, also for Singapore in terms of our overall growth in our economy. So I would say that the tripartite formula that we have developed under Lee Kuan Yew, and now with every successive government, has been a competitive advantage, and I'm doing my very best to protect this and to make sure that we do better in this cause.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. Do we have time, and would you mind if we take some questions from the audience?
I'm happy to. Yeah, if there's any questions.
Do we have a house mic that we can use for hearing the question? Okay. Just raise your hand if you have a question for a minister. Otherwise, I'll have to go to part 2 of my questions. Yes. Okay, we have a question from the front here.
So I usually don't ask questions, but I can't resist the opportunity. So thank you for making it available, and thank you for sharing. Would you be comfortable sharing?
Can I know your name?
Yes, Abiola from Nigeria. I work with SCL, Andrew and Christina. Would you be comfortable sharing a time where you felt like, I can't do this anymore, and how you got past it?
Thank you, Fiona. Welcome to Singapore, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe because I spent a lot more time in the armed forces, almost 30 years, there were many occasions where I thought about leaving the armed forces after my contractual obligations. I remember one particular occasion where I had a very uncomfortable encounter with someone very senior in my organization, and it crosses my own values threshold. I think we all have our own values threshold. And when we talk about causes, the values is very important, right? It has to connect with your own personal values. And I think we all work in an organization that sometimes the people around us, or even our superiors, our organizations, may not always do things the way we think it ought to be doing. So there was one particular occasion, I will not elaborate the details of it, but suffice to say that it was troubling enough for me to decide that maybe this is it. I was about mid-career, about 12 years into my career. And I said that maybe this is enough. I've done 12 years, and I've seen this happening, and maybe I should move on. And I went back home. I decided to type a resignation letter, and I did. This was my very first time I typed a resignation letter. And then, of course, all senses and all good husbands will remember that you better consult your wife, right? Because you better talk through this with her. So I did what all good husbands will do and all wise men will do. I kind of showed her that I have made this decision. I've already decided. And then all she said, yeah, okay, sure, if that's what you want to do. But, you know, all wives will have a but. And she asked me a very important question. And she said, is this how you want to leave the organization that you have served for 12 years and you really love? And she know that I love the army, right? So she asked that question, is this how you want to exit this organization? Which is at a rather low point, right? So it dawned on me that actually, maybe this is not how I want to leave this organization, this cause that I've served for 12 years. Perhaps I would prefer to leave at a higher point rather than a low point. And then I struggled for a few days. I talked to a few more people, and I decided that, you know, what does this speak of me if I cannot deal with any disagreements or anything that don't go my way in the army, even things that I don't like or I cannot agree with? What does this speak of me if I just leave, right? Rather than to stay and fight and to do something about it. So hence, since then, I've decided I shall never leave an organization on the low point. And I've never left an organization on the low point.
Thank you for that. Well, it looks like our time has come to an end with the minister, and we sure appreciate the time and the personal sharing that you've given us today. It's a real gift. It truly is. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tan, if I can ask you to remain a little bit on stage, please. Mr. Jim too. And I would like to invite Mr. Lawrence Chung to come on stage, please, because we would like to offer you a token of appreciation. Yeah. And now a photo for the three of you, if it's possible. Mr. Tan, you take a photo here, yes? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. New generations are the ones who will impact the future. Thank you, Mr. Jim. Now, what if the parents of this new generation, if they couldn't find someone to support them finding their way? Does this mean that the way of their children is lost too? Does this mean that these children are put at risk? Mr. Joshua Chua will tell us everything about it today. Mr. Joshua Chua is the chairman of NeuGen Fund Management Board. He brings extensive experience from his tenure as managing director of JP Morgan Asset Management. He also serves on various boards and committees, including the Yellow Ribbon Fund, where he supports ex-offenders and their families. Please welcome Mr. Chua for an impactful speech on igniting a new generation beyond intergenerational offending.
Good morning. What a beautiful day, actually, to be in bed, but we're here. Jim, just like you, I'm from Indiana University for 4 years, so we have something in common. My topic today is actually igniting a new generation beyond intergenerational offending. It's a really big title. But intergenerational offending is also a very long phrase. But what it is, the word says, some families constantly struggle to get out of this vicious cycle of committing crime, generation after generation, like from grandfather to father to grandchildren. Now you might ask that why this is the case, because most of us would think that crime in itself is a personal choice, right? If you want to steal something or you want to take drugs, it's a personal choice. But it is actually not quite a personal choice, and I will demonstrate to you with a story. I think just a few months ago, we met this lady. She had been in prison in and out, maybe 20 over years, 7 times in total, all for drug offenses. And when we spoke to her, she herself, her father was also a drug addict, was also in prison. Her father raped her when she was very young. And because she needs to escape from the home, she needs to find an escape route, she started hanging out, with crowds that she shouldn't have, and delved into drugs. Today, she has, I think she has been in prison for, 25 years, and she's still struggling to wean out this drug habit. But more importantly of my story is that she has 7 children, of which 5, she has got no clue the whereabouts of that first 5 children. I think she doesn't even know some of the fathers of these children. So can you imagine for her growing up in a house, and what Mr. Desmond Tan said, 60 square meters, 13 of them. And many of our beneficiaries lived in that sort of condition today. Can you imagine with that sort of environment, do you want to stay inside the house, or do you want to go outside and play? And when you have an abusive father or abusive mother, you want to get out. So this is why intergenerational offending, in some sense, is not a choice. It is the environment that created the necessary condition for you to want to commit a crime, like take drugs, like create violence in your later part in your adulthood life. So what's the population size? I mean, I was an ex-banker, so typically we always ask this question, like, what is the addressable market we are talking about? This is exactly the first question I joined 2 years ago when I joined NeuGen. What's the addressable market? You'll be surprised that actually we don't publish any data on this. The government doesn't track this number. So what we did was a very quick and dirty way of understanding exactly what is the size of the addressable market we are talking about. So we take a snapshot of the current inmates in prison today, and it's always about plus minus 10,000, that sort of number. So take it at 10,000. And the prison published the data saying that it is actually 20% of their inmates will have children below the age of 18. So we are looking at about 2,000 families today. And this is just a snapshot. So if you were to check back in time, the numbers is actually a lot higher, a lot higher. But let's take, it's 2,000 families. So if you add on the number of kids, we would actually, the addressable number of children we have will be bigger than that number. And the other question is, what's the risk profile? What is the propensity for these children to end up in prison like their parents? Well, Minister Shanmugam recently said in Parliament that the number of drug addicts, the propensity of the drug addicts children to commit crime themselves is actually about 1 in 5. 1 in 5 of the children will commit crime for the drug addicts. So when I tell you the story of the lady who has 7 kids, more than one has already booked his or her place in the prison cell sometime down the road. So can you imagine growing up in an environment and has a tag behind your back that you have a 20% chance that you will end up in prison? As to paraphrase what Jim said, do you really have a purpose when you have that sort of probability that you end up in jail? Do you really have a purpose or cause? I think most of them will just wander around doing nothing, because this is how life is for many of these children. What's the cause of it? I mean, I mentioned, the living environment, the cause of intergenerational offending. I think one of the things that I want to really highlight is actually childhood trauma. And I got to just illustrate a story, a personal story, because I have a friend, and her husband was a drug addict, unfortunately, and went to jail. So one day the husband came home, intoxicated, decided to beat up the wife, rape her, and took video of the whole scene. Very proud of it. She was intoxicated, only to find out that throughout the whole event, his 2 children, the 2 girls, were next to the bed hiding. One was 7 years old and one was 9 years old. This sort of scenes, even if adults were to see it, we would be extremely aghast by this. But for kids growing up, they would be unable to reconcile a lot of the things that they witness. So the emotional pain, the emotions are so overwhelmed that sometimes the brain will try to shut it down, and you'll keep it some part of the brain so that you try not to remember, but it will never go away for trauma. It will resurface one day. I raise this up so that I want to tell you that a lot of the behavior that we see today is nothing more than just the traumas that are being surfaced, like you try to take drugs just to numb yourself, that sort of thing. You want to forget a lot of the things. So it is related if you have a bad experience in the childhood days. We have been doing this since 2011. We started off, we help inmates, and then we realized that actually it is not just helping ex-offenders to integrate into the society. It is not sufficient. The kids themselves have to be protected and helped along the way. I share this with you because when we talk about the numbers of 2,000 and more, today we are just only serving about 300 of them. So we have a long way to go in terms of where we want to be in correcting this problem in intergenerational offending. The other thing I want to highlight also is that majority of our beneficiaries lived in what we call reconstructed homes. So that is, important because you really don't have a family unit. You move from one foster homes to the next most of the time, but parents are never around. This is what we do. At the end of the day, we are just trying to create a very stable environment through various types of programs because we believe that with the stability, people can then sit down and discover who they are, and then they will come and think about the purpose and they think about the cause. But we need to stabilize their environment. We provide a lot of things like education. If you fail in school, we will give you tuition. We will make sure we double down so that you stay in school. If you cannot study, we give you grants to go learn whatever you want. We support football coaching. We support music, whatever it is. Basically, just to make sure that we are there for the person. And this is a kind of job that there is no measurement of success, or success is measured only after a long time, because it has to be going on forever till the children is in adulthood. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So, sorry, no? I will give him a minute. Okay. So, what? The water is coming down from the jewel. Are you seeing? If you want to come close, the water is now coming down from the jewel. It's very interesting to see. We will have another one after lunch too. Okay, sorry. So for people who are not seeing, there is a waterfall in the middle. And it will happen, this will happen again after lunch. We will see it. We will pause for this. Super, they got their time. Now, thank you, really thank you, because this last speech touched me so much because I have a 2.5-year-old girl. And I was wondering how we can help for people who don't, for kids who don't have parents around, to be able to feel the love and to feel they can still grow, whatever happens with their parents. So thank you very much for giving me this, for giving me to understand we don't always need to start new things. We need to gather, to join forces. Nobody knows, maybe at some point I can get in touch with this organization and we can also do something, really. So what if inmates had access to uplifting music? Do you think music can have an impact? Can it change something? Mr. Darrell Ang believes it does. He has an inspiring vision for change through music. He is the artistic director of the Sichuan Symphony Orchestra, with a dynamic leadership style and acclaimed compositions like Fanfare for a Frazzled Earth. Darrell's speech, Concerto for a Change, will inspire us. Mr. Ang, mic is yours.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here and speaking to you and sharing with you my ideas. I just got off a flight, a red-eye flight from Guangzhou in China. It's not so far, but it's a red-eye flight. So my talk today is entitled, how to conduct a concerto for change. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to conduct. Rather, I'm telling myself exactly what I'm going to do and the steps I need to achieve my vision. Just very briefly, are there photos of me? Just in case, for those of you who don't know what I do, I'm a conductor. And usually when people ask me what do I conduct, I sometimes, in a fit of humor, I will say mostly trains and buses. But in reality, I conduct symphony orchestras. Now, these are huge dinosaurs of 100 or 120 people playing different instruments, starting from violins to tubas to percussion instruments. And I do this everywhere in the world. I've been doing this for the past 15 years. If you're Singaporean, if you live in Singapore, and if you listen to music, you would probably have been to one of my concerts. And if you are a collector of CDs, of classical music albums, you might have come across some of my albums as well. However, I'm here to talk about a different thing, a different subject. Not so much about my conducting activities, but about how I am going to, no, that's too ambitious, how I plan to change the world with music. Now, look, I'm not the first person to come up with such an arrogant statement, no. And I won't be the last, okay, I assure you. But I find that in my years of conducting professionally, of music making professionally, none of the people in my industry focus on anything outside of our musical work. Maybe that's normal. I guess that's normal. If you're in finance, you don't really care about what happens in the medical field, unless, of course, your portfolio in your financial work involves people or projects in the medical field. Okay, I understand that. However, as a musician, and I've trained professionally. I studied in Russia for 6 years. Prior to that, I was in Austria for 2 years, and then I spent 2 years in the United States for my master's. So I've been everywhere. I conduct everywhere. I've lived everywhere. And I know almost everybody in my business, and I can tell you that classical musicians are a strange breed. So why do I say that? We spend all our lives practicing our instruments. We spend 8 hours every day from the time we were born, well, almost, practicing our instruments. That's a good thing, right? It's discipline. It also ensures that you have a long-term vision, that you intend to perfect your skills, you hone your talents until a ripe old age when you can step on stage and make no mistake. It's like being an acrobat or a full-time athlete, where every twitch of a muscle will gain a different result. And being a professional musician is exactly the same thing. So we spend 8 hours every day, almost from the time we were born, practicing our instruments. So we don't really know what happens around us. We don't know what's happening probably in the field of politics, except the great wars or whatever's happening in Russia, Ukraine, etc., etc. The big news, yeah, we know. But we know just this much. Forget about financial subjects, forget about health-related matters. We're not interested in any of that, but I am. So I decided when COVID started that I was going to do something about myself. So that was my first step, my very first step in conducting my own Concerto for Change. But there is a greater reason behind this. Now, as a child, my passions were not musical or anything music related. I was, and I still am, very fond of wildlife, of animals, and of nature, and of this planet that we live on. I'm not a tree hugger, okay, I must assure you, I'm not. But I do see the amount of damage that all of us are doing in our pursuit for wealth, in our pursuit for happiness, and in our pursuit for very short-term gains. And it hurts me because I find that as human beings, we are not very aware of the little things that we do to the other inhabitants of this planet, be they flora or fauna. And it affects me every minute of my waking life, and even professionally. So as a musician, what I do is I travel around the world to perform. And my schedule is booked 2-3 years in advance. So I began this talk by mentioning that I just got off a plane. I'm currently in the middle of a tour with my symphony orchestra. I am the artistic director of the Sichuan Symphony Orchestra, one of the best symphony orchestras in China. And we are touring the Guangdong region. I just did 5 concerts. I had one last night. And I'm having one tomorrow. Thankfully, today's an off day. So I was able to take the red-eye flight, arrive here, speak to all of you, and then I got to scoot again. So in my line of work, what I've been doing for the past 15 years is my manager in London receives calls, and they say, okay, we want Darrell to come there with our orchestra to perform this program, and this happens, this is a weekly activity. So pre-COVID, my schedule would be very insane. A good example would be, say, week 1, I would be performing in Singapore. Week 2, I would fly to Austria, Vienna, to conduct a concert. Week 3, I would be in Mexico City, and you know how far that is from Austria, Vienna. Then week 4, I would have to fly to Melbourne, Australia. So I would circumvent the whole globe in just 1 month. That would be my typical schedule. And I somehow, after doing all of that for so many years, I start to ask myself, I question, why do I do this? I'm far away from family. I don't get to spend enough time, sufficient time with the people I love, with the things that I really want to do. Sure, I love my job. It's not a job, it's a passion. It's like being a priest, right? You get a calling, you do it, and you don't question. You never do. So that's me and my work. Until recently, because I find that it gets meaningless when there is no real purpose attached to it other than one's career. And I began to realize that this doesn't fulfill me. Because what I really want to do is to use my music to speak to people, to use my music to tell people that we are all here for a very specific purpose, a special purpose. And of course, we have our responsibilities. And first and foremost, our responsibilities toward each other are to, for example, work with each other, to cultivate strong ties and relationships with each other. Above all, to protect the planet that we live on and the inhabitants around us, the animals, the plants, the nature, that do not have a voice. We have voices. People, we have voices. In fact, we are very loud. And the louder we are, the more we want. But the other living things around us, the trees, the mountains, the waterfalls, the birds, the lions in the African grasslands, the antelopes, the polar bears, they have no voices. Nobody can hear them. Nobody understands them. Nobody can see that they're suffering. And what I really wanted to do was to use my talents for that purpose. And so I decided during COVID was a great time for me. I don't know about you, I hope none of you suffered very much, but for me, I came to realize many things. I came, first of all, to get in very close touch with my principles and with my real, true desires, with what I really wanted to do with myself. And therefore, COVID was the beginning of my Concerto for change. So I have been on this journey since then to improve myself. I took 2 MBAs during COVID, and I started several businesses. None of them really survived, but that's my entrepreneurial journey. I still do conduct. I told you I just got off a plane from a concert, but I have a greater plan, a greater vision, and I'm hoping to include as many people around the world as possible, starting with all of you. It's easy for me to sit down here and say, okay, guys, we have a mission, we have to save this planet. Yeah, okay, everybody says that. Yeah, the big petroleum companies say that too. But what do we really do? I think what really matters is that this knowledge of what we have to do in order to keep ourselves going, this planet going, the environment and nature surviving starts with every single one of us. Now, if you're a business owner, small, medium, or large, or if you are a politician, or if you dabble in something else, I would urge you to, first and foremost, think about the future. Because without caring for the planet, without caring for the other inhabitants of this wonderful and beautiful earth, there is no future for us. Now, I'm a wine lover, I'm a coffee lover, I don't know if you are. But I can assure you, being a wine lover, the vintages that are coming out nowadays are not so good. They're not as good as before. Same with coffee, same with cocoa. I love chocolate. Now, if we don't do anything to prevent what is happening, climate change, climate crisis. Have you been reading about turbulence in the air? I don't know if that's related to climate change. I don't know. The news and media want us to think so, but I don't listen to news and media. It could be related. Everything that we do has an effect on everything else around us. And I would urge all of you, since I have the pleasure of meeting you today, to, in future, support me in my mission to improve or to inform the greater world around us that this is something that we should care for. Nature, the environment, wildlife. This is what we should be fighting for. Yes, I think we can also be successful in doing all that while in pursuit of wealth, while in pursuit of greater comfort. But I think if we were to get our priorities straight, the twain can meet. We can have both worlds. And I hope it starts with all of us, and I definitely would like to conduct this Concerto for change. And in future, in a very, very near future, perhaps tomorrow, I will be using music, my music, to lead this change. And I'm so happy to share this with you, because you're the first people to hear it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as I told you before, I thought that we were going to have a chance to see the opening of the vortex because we thought it was at 11. But the vortex is now open and the time for our break is here. So you can enjoy the vortex and you can have a break. We will come back at 11. We will start at 11:10 sharp, but let's start coming back at 11. Is that okay? See you.